Hello, fifth form. We're going to continue with Stink. Chapter 4, Miss Space Camp Know-It-All, page 45. The next day, Stink was sitting at his own desk, minding his own business, when Riley Rottenberg waltzed past, showing off her new t-shirt. It did not say Space Cadet. It did not say Space Out at Space Camp. It said Pluto is dead. "Who is that?" asked Skunk. "Rotten Riley Rottenberg, aka Miss Know-It-All." Riley turned round. She faked smile at Stink and Skunk. "When is a planet not a planet?" she asked them. "When it's grumpy," said Stink. "When it's sneezy," said Skunk. "No, when it's Pluto," said Riley, gagging all the way to her desk. "Pluto is so a planet," said Stink. "A dwarf planet." He turned to Skunk. "She thinks she's so great 'cause she got to go to space camp. For your information, Pluto is not a planet anymore," said Riley. "Don't you guys know anything? Oh, I forgot. You never went to space camp." Riley was right. Stink had never been to space camp. He had never tried on a spacesuit, except one made out of aluminium foil in preschool. And he'd never seen inside a spaceship, except the cardboard box kind. "Did you get to ride in the gravity chair?" Skunk asked Riley. "And the 5 degrees of freedom chair," said Riley. "It floats on air." Stink wished he had 5 degrees of freedom from Riley Rottenberg. "Don't ask her questions," Stink warned, "or she'll never ever stop." "Why didn't Saturn want to sit next to Jupiter?" Skunk asked anyway. "Why?" asked Riley. "Because Jupiter had a lot of gas," said Skunk, holding his nose. "Hey, no fart jokes in class," said Miss Know-It-All. Mrs. D said. "I have one," said Stink. He couldn't help himself. "Why didn't Saturn's mom want him to have a bath?" "Why?" asked Skunk. "Because he always left rings in the bathtub." "Good one," said Skunk. Riley ignored them. "Time to get into groups," said Mrs. D. Stink was on a team with Webster and Sophie of the Elves. He asked Skunk to join them. Each team was making a model of the solar system. Stink and his team were using foam balls for the planets. They dipped hunks of raw wool in soapy water. Once the wool was stretchy, they shaped it around each ball to form the outer surface of the planet. Riley's team was making planets out of fancy clay. Riley leaned over and pointed to the tiny ball in Stink's hand. "What's that?" "What does it look like?" "It's the planet Pluto." "Stink moody," said Riley. "How many times do I have to tell you? There is no planet Pluto." "Is too," said Stink. "Is not. Is so too." Riley turned round. Webster said, "You're not even on our team." "I don't see why everybody's so down on Pluto," mumbled Stink. Here is how they built each planet with the raw wool. "I don't see why everybody's so down on Pluto," mumbled Stink, adding a touch of purple gray to his planet. "Pluto's cool. It might be small, but it doesn't just do what all the other planets do. It has its own orbit." "Yeah," said Skunk. "I don't get why they voted to take it away." "Because Pluto's punny like a dwarf," Riley buttoned in. "Pluto gets its butt kicked by all the other planets. If an asteroid came, Pluto would be all, 'Ah, I'm scared,' and shrink away." "Nuh-uh," said Stink. "Yaha. Ask anybody. I learned about it at space camp." "Space camp, space camp, space camp," said Stink. People should boycott Space Camp from telling lies about Pluto. Stink, Riley, Mrs. T said sharply. What's going on back there? You're supposed to be working on your science projects. Riley's hands shot up in the air. This is science, she said. That's what we were fighting about. Mrs. T came over to their tables. What seems to be the problem? Riley says there's no Pluto, said Stink. And I say there is. Riley, what makes you say there's no Pluto? Asked Mrs. T. You said it yourself, said Riley. Pluto got its butt kicked out of the solar system. It's just a number now. Riley, I'd rather you didn't say but in my class. Stink couldn't help smiling when his teacher said but. But it's still up there, Stink said, even if it's a dwarf planet. Actually, said Mrs. T, you're both right. Huh? Scientists argue about it too. They had to study Pluto for a long time. Then they had a big meeting, said Riley, and voted it out. Out! Yes, they did, said Mrs. T. But some scientists still think Pluto should be called a planet. Yes! Stink pumped his arm in the air and high-fived his team. Tell you what, said Mrs. T. Why don't we turn it over to our panel of scientists? You mean we get to be scientists right here in our classroom? Asked Stink. Sure, we can have a discussion, a debate next Friday. Riley, your team can explain why you think Pluto shouldn't be a planet anymore. Stink, your team can argue why Pluto should still be a planet. You have exactly 1 week to prepare your arguments. Super Galileo, said Stink. Riley narrowed her eyes at him. Stink Moody, you're such a Pluto head. Thanks, said Stink, sitting up a little taller.